So I've done presentations like this one. This one is a little bit different because times have changed, you see. For those who don't know me, there's a few new faces here. I've been a featured speaker around the world. I've hosted events and been a featured speaker around the country. And that's because I'm less of a YouTuber and more of an analyst who happens to have a YouTube channel. I go out and meet experts. I have friends who are in all sectors of power, well, 3 or 4 sectors of power, and all throughout the automotive industry. And they are able to give me insights. And when I don't have the insights, I at least have an expert on speed dial. So that's helpful. So that's who I am. And for those who haven't been to one of my presentations before, you should know that if you stick around to the end, I always bring prizes, which will be over here for you to peruse through. It is a very cheap way to bribe my audience into appreciating me. So the first big one, battery cost reduction. Batteries are going to get cheaper. They've been getting cheaper. There's room for them to get cheaper still. You remember just the batteries you would get, your alkaline batteries used to be expensive, and now they're much less expensive. It's because the minerals are easy to get, the equipment is easier to build, the process and the procedure is better, the shipping is better, all of that. But there'll also be new materials, new chemistries that are even cheaper. So if we look at what it costs to actually make a battery, if you look back just 10 years, you'll see it was expensive. The cells alone, $535 per kilowatt hour. At the pack level, you're up at 780. So that's why your Nissan Leaf had a 28 kilowatt hour battery. It was still 25 grand for the battery, just for the battery. And well, I want more range. It's gonna cost 150 grand. And in some cases it did. And even then, Nissan, of course, was losing money, and they still couldn't sell them. So they would lease them out for nothing and lose even more money, which is why they weren't too aggressive on them. You look over here, boy, it's getting affordable. And that's even last year. And that 139 at the pack level is still kind of high. There's manufacturers who are well below that. Then you get into the new technologies, the solid state, which is coming any day now and has been for 10 years. But other ones, cobalt-free lithium ion, that would be your LFP battery. Those are fantastic. Those have gotten very good and quite cheap. Sodium ion, we hear a bit about it, but it doesn't really seem to happen. And there's reasons for that. The biggest reason is lithium got cheap again. Kind of not as critical, but they did do some vehicle testing with those, and they do have other use cases. Iron air, batteries, very heavy, not ideal for a lot of uses. Every chemistry has advantages and disadvantages, and this gives you an idea. NMC, the green one over here, this is what's in most electric cars in the US. In the world, LFP is starting to take the lead because that not very good bar across the top for specific energy capacity has gotten way better. So that line should be up by like a full bar. But NMC was where it was at. And then of course these others have different benefits as well that for different use cases. Then you get to this exciting bit, which says, we want battery manufacturing here in the US, or at least in North America. If you're gonna build a battery factory, we'll give you $35 per kilowatt hour for whatever you produce. And put in the pack, we'll give you another $10. And if you just buy them and put it in the pack, we'll still give you the 10, but not the 35. And that's a way to bring it back. So there you go, $35 a kilowatt hour, $10 more for the module. If you're talking about something like a Tesla Model S or a Lucid Air, you're at about 100 kilowatt hour battery pack. If you make that battery in the US, you get $4,500 back as the manufacturer. That's real money, and that drives down the cost, obviously, if the manufacturer's getting paid for it. So if we go back to this, you'll see, well, if we're already at 139 and you're getting $45 off of that, the batteries have gotten quite cheap. Now you'll notice it is slowing down a bit in terms of price drops, but That's because there's a floor to anything. Sodium ion and iron air batteries don't go in cores. So how does that help us? Well, it helps because right now the battery that goes into your power wall in your garage or the mega pack at your utility, those are using LFP batteries. Well, if we can stop doing that, we can put those LFPs in cars. Now we've got a lot available, because if you think of how many battery cells it takes to make a stationary power unit, it's a lot. So if you put these batteries in the power plants and in the garages, you've got more of the good stuff that can go in the cars. And these are coming, just, like a lot of things, it can take a minute. Economies of scale, of course. If you're gonna make 1,000 of something, it's quite expensive. If you're gonna make one of something, it can cost as much as you want, millions. The first one cost many, many millions. The first 1,000 cost a whole lot. And then when you get to the millions, you start getting cheaper. If you want, and that's every part of the car, the blinkers, the turn stocks. There's a reason Ford has a standard turn stock. It's because it is affordable. It's the way they want to do it. So you get into a virtue cycle. And the opposite can be true. If a vehicle's volume gets too low, you get into a vicious cycle, which drives up the cost, which makes it very painful. There are technological innovations that you can look for beyond the battery innovations. Cheaper motors, cheaper everything. I mean, better manufacturing, better aerodynamics, but all that will reduce your cost. But the new manufacturing techniques is the new breakthrough. For 100 years, we had an assembly line, and Tesla said, what if we do it a little different? And they were the ones who tried it, and now others are copying it. Their philosophy, famously, the best part is no part. And you think, right, but I need parts. I need them. Well, it turns out you don't always need as many as you thought. Of course, when it comes to the motor, you know what that looks like. That's just a 3-cylinder engine on the top. It was the best picture I could find. And even this is a little more complicated than a lot of EV motors are. So this paints the most generous picture of the difference, but that's just the drivetrain. If you look at the battery pack, yeah, there's a lot of parts to it, thousands, but they're not moving parts. They're glued together and can be done so by robots. This was the first one that Tesla did that was revolutionary. If you look at the colors over here, that rainbow represents 171 pieces of metal. And over here, it represents 2 pieces. They cast it as one piece. The assembly line gets shorter. The number of robots drops dramatically. The amount of time it takes to build. The quality of the build, because those 2 pieces come out perfectly straight. So there's no tolerances to have to deal with. And even though Tesla was the first to do it, it wasn't a new idea. It's something that Sandy Munro out in Detroit from Munro and Associates had on display in his lobby for decades. And he would show it to people and go, why aren't you doing something like this? Say, oh my gosh, you know what that machine would look like? It would look like that.
Yeah, we do now.
We do now. And this is the smallest of them. This is the one that just does the front piece. This has 6,000 tons of clamping force. And this is now considered small. The Cybertruck has a 9,000 ton casting machine. And companies around the world have already started adopting this. This is not just Tesla anymore. You can see Geely, NIO, even Toyota. But I know from people in the industry, it is almost everyone. Honda's got a machine, whether they'll admit it or not. All of the major players either have them in and are configuring them, or they've got them on order.
And why would they not?
Once you know it works, the reason they wouldn't is if your volume is too low, the cost doesn't make sense. But your Camrys, your Corollas, your Civics, your Accords, come on. This is a company in China where they said, why do 2 castings when we could do the entire underbody in one with this? And this machine is a 16,000 ton clamping force machine, which makes the other one, this one would fill an exhibition center. I think that might be going too far, but if you would like to push the boundaries so I don't have to, I'm okay with that too. So there's a lot of, the other thing that Tesla did is instead of it being an assembly line, when I toured the factory in Fremont, I said, okay, I've seen the model, the line that makes the Model S and X. It's very nice. You've shown me part of the lines that make the Model 3. You've got 2 lines, is that correct? Yes, that's correct. I said, you're not showing me the Model Y line. How many of those do you have? And they said, well, it's the wrong question. It's not a line. I tried every analogy. I said, is it a river that gets wide? No. Is it an octopus? Is it a circle? What is it? It's all these things converging in different ways in different places. And it also uses vertical space, which factories before really didn't do. This is Toyota's next step. They took this from Tesla's. Tesla calls this the unboxed method, where all the pieces go on, all of the sub-assemblies, and then they bring them together all at once. So you can have, it makes it so that delays in the line are moved out of the line itself, and they're easier to predict. A line can run at full capacity more of the time. And it makes it so that the end product is better and cheaper and more reliable. Government incentives, obviously, these are going to play a role, at least for a while. At least until the cars are so much cheaper that it's obvious to everyone that they're the right solution. Depending who wins in the House or the Senate or the White House, these can change. So get them while they're hot. So let's just look at that IRA credit on batteries. It's not the IRA, it's the national whatever. It's some other one, but it's part of it. If you've got a car that costs $40,000 to build, and you want to mark it up to 10%, it's a $45,000 car. If you take that battery credit off, and that's just a 75 kilowatt hour battery, the kind you might find in a Model 3 or Model Y or most mid-sized cars. Now their cost is $36,000. They can get the same markup and sell it to you for $41,000. And if you qualify for the IRA credit, which most buyers do, $33,000. That's below the average cost of an average car today, to get you a car that really should cost $45,000. Of course, increased competition. We've been saying the competition is coming for years, and it finally is. I can agree, it finally is. I've spent, in the previous talk, there was a lot of mention of Platt Auto down in, and I've been out there a number of times. They're gracious enough to let me drive anything I want around to make a review. There is nothing but capable cars, competent cars. A lot of them are not for me. I'm not going to buy a Fiat or a Mini or a Leaf. A Leaf doesn't suit my purposes. But they're all real, serious cars. And the more they build, the more competition there is, the more everybody seems to win, the more the supply chain can stock up on the minerals, the elements, the batteries, all of that. And of course, mining. Mining is improving. There was a time within the last few years, even when they said, we're going to run out of lithium. And just like anything you look for, the harder you look, the more you find. A lot of the lithium deposits weren't undiscovered. They just hadn't been notated because there's so much of it and it's so cheap. Why would we even mention it unless it's very abundant? And the more we look, the more we find. Lithium is not going to be the issue, and if we run out of lithium, we've still got all the batteries we've already made, we'll recycle them. But I mean, it is cost effective to get lithium from seawater because it is that abundant as an element. Doing good. And then of course, manufacturing efficiency. This is something that's still speeding up. Because the cars are simpler, you can rethink the entire process, the assembly line that we were just talking about. You can just do it better. And yeah, all of the different pieces of it are coming along. The digital twin of your car, when your car is made, there's a digital twin. They put it in the computer, and every bolt, every serial number, everything is stored. And recently, Tesla had the world's smallest recall in history. Anybody care to guess how many cars they recalled? That is correct. That is correct. One. One car. If you didn't have that kind of technology, what would you do? Well, you'd either recall none at all, or you'd recall a number that's far too great. And then what? Well, we'll recall 30 and see if none of them have it, just cancel it. I don't know. Okay, we have made it. I hit my timeline. Perfect. Q&A. Yes, sir.
So on one of the very first slides you showed, it was a comparison of the different battery types.
Yes.
Lithium ion at the upper left.
Yep.
So it showed, as I understood your four-way graph, it showed the lithium ion batteries being the most unsafe or the least safe.
Let's take a look. So NMC, the green one is what cars are currently using. Safety is up there, but not as much. When you're talking about safety on a battery, usually what you're talking about is thermal risk, fire safety. If you look at LFP in the purple there, you'll see it has the highest safety score because it's the least likely to burn. It doesn't have as much toxic stuff in it that's going to make it dangerous. If you look at NCA, lower safety, I assume that's for thermal reasons. Anyone else? Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Parts count. Hyundai needs a lesson. I'm rebuilding one. 12 pieces in the bumper cover.
Okay. Hyundai needs a lesson. Too many parts. At the Ford Museum in Dearborn, Michigan, there is a display up that shows the front headlight assembly of a Falcon or something. And then next to it, they show the same headlight assembly 2 years later. And this one is 60, 70 parts, and this one is 8, 10. That's something you learn over time. I don't know how Hyundai would have messed that up that badly. They generally are pretty good at that.
To make it look cool.
Yeah, that is a problem. Yeah, that is.
That's what we have cosmetics for, right? Make it look cool.
That is a problem. Well, there are a lot of new car lessons that these people are still learning, even if they've got a million years of experience. You take Lucid, if your fender camera goes out, they have to take the fender apart. They have to take the car apart, put it in, and then they have to put it on a grid and recalibrate it. It's an all-day procedure. On a Tesla, the service tech comes out, pops it in. You didn't even know he was there until you saw your phone. And it's going to take about 10 miles of driving. It's reconfigured. They'll figure it out.
I was up at the Everything Electric conference last weekend.
Me too.
And I didn't see one of the things I thought was the presentation by Aptera was fascinating in terms of how they did their manufacturing. They are doing their entire frame as a single casting.
Poly resin.
Then instead of bending sheet metal, they're taking and injecting carbon fiber injectable into a high pressure molding system, and it makes all of the parts of the body that don't move, and some of the ones that do, like the door skins. It just is an injectable thing. It all is super strong, super light. An aluminum underbody doesn't rust, and that kind of engineer or that kind of manufacturing takes that the best part is no part philosophy down to its extreme essence in a car that will go 300 miles on about 45 kilowatts of power.
Right. So what Aptera is doing is, if they can make it and their approach is low enough in terms of capital intensiveness that I think they could make it, is they went back to the drawing board and said, imagine cars don't exist. What can we do to build it cheaper? And a lot of the steps they're doing look like how you would build a racing boat or a toy. And
Which was their background. They were making boats.
And now they're making spaceships. but they got to make them. Yeah, their approach is good. Metal casting is very expensive. Metal stamping is very expensive. Polyresin molding, injection molding, is expensive for you or I, but for a company level, not bad.
What are the safety factors comparing the metal and the polyresin? Are they on the same?
They haven't crash tested it yet, but it should be fine.
And it's also rated as a motorcycle, not as a.
Yeah.
They'll have a little bit.
They'll have flexibility, but they'll test it.
I was going to ask the same question, yes.
Yeah. So that's, I mean, carbon fiber is already a thing. Look at the BMW i3 crash testing. It's good. Yeah, so I don't see, repairability might be a different issue, but a lot of times, and people complain about that, well, with the castings we saw, if you break that, the car's ruined. Do you understand the amount of force it takes to intrude sufficiently to damage a piece of metal like that?
Furthermore, I weld things.
Right, and you can weld aluminum.
You can fix that, and I've done fiberglass and
Yeah.
carbon fiber. So the only thing you have to worry about is the chemistry of the mastic.
Sandy Monroe from Monroe & Associates would get so annoyed with people saying castings are fragile that he pulled out a sledgehammer and he said, let's go to two identical Teslas, one that is pre-casting and one that's post, and let's hit the shock tower. And it just deforms. Of course it does. It's stamped steel. Now let's do the casting. And he's just knocking it around the room, and there's little scratches. It's not deformed. Last question.
What are the car companies doing about the 12-volt battery? Are they still all using those? Or?
Do you mean the 12 volt? Do you mean 12 volt system? The whole. Yes.
Had a 12-volt battery was separate. They had to run.
Yeah.
batteries and all that kind of stuff.
16 volt.
So it depends on the car. The newer, I thought I needed to disconnect my battery in my Model Y. So I went on YouTube to find out where it is. And I found 3 different videos showing 3 different batteries in 3 different places because they keep updating it. So what I've got is a little funky looking, it doesn't look like a battery to me. And I think it is something like 16.7 or something like that.
Earlier one with a 12 volt sticker on it. Talk about a frickin' puzzle.
So I don't know why you still need a separate one, but they are still using it, but they're putting in lithium ion now so that you don't have to replace them every 4 or 5 years. They should last as long as the car. The more exciting question is, our cars, and I didn't put this in there because the presentation's time constrained, Tesla's moving to 48 volt. This is something the industry has wanted to do since the 80s at least, because when you go from 12 volt to 48, your wires get thinner, you drop 50 to 100 pounds of copper out of the car, and you can get more punch, which is critical on things like brake-by-wire, steer-by-wire, and four-wheel steering. But yeah, you couldn't do your four-wheel steering as effectively in 12 volt. And so they gave the manual with all the 48 volt research to everyone in the industry for free. Some of them may not have chosen to read it because he put "Love Elon" on the front. Maybe leave that part out. But it's the roadmap so everyone can get on board. And the reason no one ever did it is because we need every single piece to be 48 volt from all cajillion suppliers. And it comes out to be too much.
But since Tesla has such a vertical integration, it only affects
Yes.
them. And a smaller base.
And they were starting it on the Cybertruck, which they knew would have a slow ramp. And when it first came out, there were 2 or 3 parts left on it that were still 12 volt that they had to step down. The seat adjusters was one. Nothing critical, but guys, get it sorted out. And
They try to find a battery charger for 16 volts.
yeah,
The dealers don't have it.
yeah, why would you? That's a weird one.
I've got a very
You can get me after the show because
volt
I gotta.
charger, then you can
Yep.
dial through the volt.
Thank you guys.
Thank you, Brian.
Yep.